Wonderful. We're at 7:05 now, so I think we will go ahead and get started. I just want to say thank you everyone for attending. I'm really thrilled to see a great turnout, and we have some really wonderful guests tonight. So excited. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few things. Tonight's panel will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube. Going to record in spotlight mode, meaning that the only people being recorded will be the panelists tonight. So don't worry about that. But if you do ask a question, you might show up in the video. So just be mindful. We want to make sure you're comfortable. So if you want to turn your camera off or change your name, feel free to do so. And we'll leave some room at the end of all of this for questions. And if you want, you could drop your questions below in the chat and we'll sort through them as we get towards the end. But before we delve into tonight's discussion, I'd like to take time to acknowledge that Bluebonnet is an organization of individuals residing on traditional homelands of the people of the Munsee, Lenape, Petonic, Massachusetts, Kikakoi, Homonos, Tawakoni, Wichita, the Napa Apache, and Chickasaw nations. And our panelists are individuals residing in the homelands of the Navajo, Pueblo, Piscataway, Natakacha, Tonva, Tish, Chumash, and Quapaw nations. So as a remotely based organization with employees and partners who are geographically scattered across these lands, we want to acknowledge that Native and Indigenous people are the rightful stewards to the lands that we reside on, and that there is a deep-rooted and continuous relationship between them and their territories. We acknowledge our history of colonization and genocide of Native and Indigenous people and their lands. These cities we reside in are home to over 4,366,481 American Indians today. So that being said, I'll get started by introducing myself and our panelists. I'm Maramed. I am the operations manager here at Bluebonnet. If you aren't familiar with us, we are a political nonprofit targeting data, talent, and recruiting and matching them with progressive campaigns, specifically down ballot campaigns. And I'll be facilitating tonight's discussion, which we've intentionally themed Black futures. And we want to center tonight's conversation about how government, art, and tech not only intersect, but how they will and have shaped Black futures in the US. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed guests, starting with Ernest McMillan, who is a veteran human rights activist and community organizer whose memoir Standing and has a book of poetry and short stories titled Sitting will be published in early 2023. Ruby Powell-Dennis is here with us. She's the founder of Elect Black Women PAC and is currently running for a state Senate seat in the 31st District of Tennessee. Kristina Williams is the CEO and founder of the political tech startup Unpacking, which is a professional network for diversity, equity, and inclusion that provides gamified learning to shape healthy workplace cultures, and is also the founder of a real estate venture titled Baldwin and Simone's, that is an experimental hotel designed with travelers of color in mind. And last but not least, you heard his music at the top of the hour before we started. Crenshaw is a producer, vocalist, and DJ who has curated a transformative and fluid sound. Currently has over 370,000 Spotify listeners a month. So I'm really thrilled to be joined by all of you. And I kind of want to start this panel by asking you all what you love about being Black. I think a lot of the time as Black people, we discuss trauma and our past. And so I really want to start with a lighthearted and enriching question. What do you love about being Black?
Can I kick us off? Is that all right?
Please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruby. As was shared, my pronouns are she, her. The thing I love about being Black is there's like a universalness to Blackness. So I'm born and raised in the South, but I've lived in Denver, I've lived in Atlanta, I lived in Florida for college. And there's just like a universal head nod that like, no matter where you go, you could not know that Black person, be like, what's up? I'm like, hey, what's up? Right. It's just like, there's some things that are just so universal, whether it's the sweet tea debate versus unsweet tea debate, sweet potato pie versus yams. There's just some things that are just universal. It really doesn't matter what zip code you live in, your social economics. You know, everybody's got a grandmother, uncle, somebody back south somewhere, or just like some fond memories at somebody's house frying fish. You know, those are just some things that, you know, the Black experience is a collectivist experience. And, you know, there's so much of our oral tradition that's just handed down generation to generation. And I'll close with a good example. So when I lived in Colorado, y'all know it's the Mile High. And so you have to drink water, you'll get altitude sickness, and Black people are perpetually ashy. Like I felt like I was perpetually ashy when I lived in Denver. But it's such a Black experience that when you see a Black person that looked like they use shea butter or cocoa butter, you're like, where you get that from? Where you get that Black soap from? It was just like a universal, or who is doing your hair, right? Because I could tell you get your hair flat iron. Like there's just this universal that even if you're in predominantly white spaces, you're able to find a Black hairstylist. We're able to find one another. And I think that's just our collectivist culture that's deep in our DNA. So.
I just want to echo some of the comments Ruby enlightened us with, and especially what it's like living in a place where majority of people are other than African Americans. So I'm living in New Mexico right now, in Albuquerque specifically, and there's only 3% population of African Americans here. But when one sees another, we have to greet, hug, say something, give a high five. It's like a camaraderie there that exists. And so I'm very delighted to, we celebrated Juneteenth here, so I thought that would never happen, but it was a very grand occasion. And so even we're in remote places, quote unquote remote, we find that spirit of togetherness, of commonality and union is strongly a part of our lives. And for me, it goes back to our whole spirit of resistance and resilience to white domination and oppression and exploitation. From the time before we left African shores, crossing the middle Atlantic, hitting the United States and the Western Hemisphere in the 1500s and so forth, we've never given up. We've had our defeats, we've had some setbacks, we've had our losses, we've had many sacrifices and many who led the way to pay where we are today. And so we've never given up, and that's the spirit that I'd like to express today. And that though we look down and we look dismal and we may be bewildered, but strength within us is still alive and sparking. And I'm love being African American.
Yes, honestly, to piggyback off of what Ernest just said, I feel like one of the things I love about being Black is just the opportunity to continue to just walk around and be a living piece of culture, a living piece of history. And I think that being Black, there's just so many opportunities you see so many different representations of Black folks of all kinds, coming from all different types of backgrounds. And I think that like the wealth of that experience across age, across gender, across sexual orientation, gender expression, all of that is all that I feel like is such a beautiful thing, that you get this very polyolithic, like full experience of just like Blackness, and that each of us has like a part to play in moving that culture forward. It's not something that just kind of like sits. We are like living, breathing, walking, expanding culture. And I really do love that part of being Black, because I get to be a participant of that.
I love that our hair grows towards the sun. I love that when we laugh, we can't stand still in one place. We have to run around the house. I love that we're amazing storytellers, and there's intergenerational legacy in the stories that we tell. I love that, again, with that culture comment, Christian, like there's no other music genre or youth culture in the world that's found everywhere globally besides hip hop. And we created that. And so like when we're thinking about the impact that we have not just like within our local communities or within like American culture, like we have a global influence. If brands are trying to sell a product, if the Black community doesn't adopt it, it's not cool. It doesn't sell. It doesn't work. Like we literally are the trendsetters for what passes and fails in society. And I love that power that we possess.
Jay.
That's wonderful. I love everything that you all had to say, and I couldn't agree more with all of it. That's incredible. I feel like for me, so I'm ethnically Sudanese. My parents immigrated to the US in the late 80s. And so it's been a strange duality between being African and American and being Muslim and growing up in a predominantly Christian country. But I think ultimately, like, my favorite thing about being Black is just the sheer preservation and self-preservation, which are two things that I feel like I've inherited, but also value a lot. So that's wonderful. Okay, on to a very different note. I want to ask you all, since this conversation is centered around government, tech, and art, many Americans feel really jaded about politics, and for good reason, whether it feels like gridlocks or like deep divisions. But despite it all, you all play a role in politics and shaping the future. And I want to ask you why, despite how difficult it can be at times, why it's still important to not only be civically engaged, but also to participate in politics.
I think politics and government are definitely a lever of power that needs to be confronted and addressed and become more truly reflective of its promise, especially the so-called American promise. We've had American Revolution 1776, and we were still in chains. We've had the Civil War, and we were put back in chains through so-called Reconstruction. We had the Civil Rights Movement, and we were partially successful in accomplishing voting rights and some equal accommodation laws. But we've always been forced back because of economics, because of governmental control, back into another setback. So politics is a lever that we need to address. And I think it's a dynamic force, but it's so narrow today, and it's so rooted in compromise for status quo that it's difficult to see really progressive forces having to say so. The two-party system kind of cripples us from having all the different expressions and levels of society included and appreciated and embraced. So we have our challenges there for always. In 1964, 65, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed, but we're seeing suppression on high new levels. We're seeing gerrymandering taking place. We're seeing young people giving up on voting because they see how much of a rigorous situation it can be or is. So we have to challenge ourselves to renew ourselves to go and continue that fight because it does affect our everyday lives. I'm glad Bluebonnet is involved in this, very concentrated on the local elections and local things because we need to really start influencing on the local level as well.
I'm going to ask can you restate the question? I want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is particularly interesting to hear you talk about it, Ruby, since you're in the midst of running for state senate. I think that the state legislature is largely ignored. And a lot of the things that we care about are riding on the state legislature. So I'm really excited about your race for state senate. And I'm curious to hear from you, what inspired you to run, particularly for that role?
Yeah, so I'll zoom out and then zoom in. There are over 500,000 elected positions in our country, and the vast majority of those positions go uncontested by Black people. That's why I ran. I'm like I probably could look back, but I don't think a Black person has ever held a seat or, there's been decades, Republicans. So Tennessee, we have what is called a Republican supermajority. That means that Democrats, people of color, we could walk out of our state legislature and legislation will still pass. And today they ousted a Black woman who had been serving as a state senator. Even though the gentleman I'm running against is a white guy, 7th-generation Tennessean, and is under indictment and his passports have been taken. And he's under indictment for campaign finance, and he's raised $253,000 under indictment. So, you know, you got to get involved in politics, because for him to be able to raise $125,000 under indictment, like all in the news, not a secret, that tells you there are people who don't care. They're going to do everything they can to get their people in. And, you know, if people want to pretend it's a meritocracy, if I work hard, keep my head down, I'll be okay. You can certainly do that, but they own their job. Evil is on its job. And I think that sometimes we like to believe that there's going to be some person who's going to rise up and take care of this. And it's like, no, it's not. We the adults in the room. We the adults. You know, when you think about that, I'm a little bit older than what Martin Luther King Jr. was when he died. So I've got work to do. You know, a lot of times we imagine these leaders that came before us to be older and have all this stuff. They had less resources than we have, less support than we have, greater barriers than we have. And their lives were on the line, every decision they were making. How I know this, I'm a descendant of the Deacons of Defense. My family members provided protection to men who were people involved in the civil rights movement when they would come through small towns in Louisiana. And I share that because what am I to look at all the things that my ancestors, people I directly descended for, they struggle for in rural communities, for me to get my college degrees, secure my bag and go on? What? But that's what's happening, because we have just internalized that we can operate from a place of individualism and yet demand systems and structures that were not built for us in a country that built its wealth on our back to respect us. People don't give respect. You have to take it. You have to demand it. And I think that's the hard part about it, is because a lot of times we want candidates to give us enthusiasm. But again, when we look at the donor data from Elect Black Women PAC, it's why we started. Black people are not politically tithing. You have to tithe politically. We'll go get a Louis Vuitton bag, but we won't donate $50 to Val Demings, Chief Justice Beasley, or any of these Black women running for Senate, even though we don't have a Black woman in the United States Senate. So I say all that to say that's why I ran. I didn't run because I was the smartest person, the richest person. You know, I believe I'm the best candidate for the job. Let me be very clear. But at the end of the day, if I don't run, this seat will go uncontested. And this gentleman will shake that federal indictment, retain his seat, and continue to engage in foolishness. And this is a person who voted down taking slavery out of our state constitution. We are 4 state legislatures away from conservatives being able to change the Constitution of the United States. Y'all better wake up and get on y'all's job. People shouldn't have to ask and beg you to vote. And I think that there's a level of realness we have to have as progressive millennial leaders about the fact that folks are more worried about going viral on TikTok than following election dates and promoting those. And until we have that conversation, you know, we're not going to get transformational change. And that wealth gap that we talk about between white and Black families, it will only widen until we actually get failed policy off the books and get elected leaders in who are the living descendants and living the experience of failed policies in Black and brown communities. But, you know, I'm gonna get off my soapbox.
No, and on that note, you founded Elect Black Women recently, only in 2020, right? With the hopes of helping elect Black women in these positions and to like actively fight back against the anti-Black, pro-suppression. A lot of that rhetoric has flooded our political dialogue, right? So what have you found to be the most rewarding about starting the PAC, but also encouraging Black women to vote and seeing them get this like outpour of support?
Most of the Black women that I get a chance to talk to and work with, they are transformative. They are amazing. And there are situations where we're the first organization to ever ask that Black woman to run for office. Like no one asked Black women to run for office. And that's really hard. You'll ask a Black woman for everything else. You ask her for her time, her car. You ask for everything else now. You know, you fix me something, but we never asked Black women to run for office. And during that time, we thought when we kicked off.
That is.
Yeah, listen, I ain't always been saved. I like to tell people that. I ain't always been saved.
To do everything for you, but run for office.
But the thing is that a lot of times these races, you know, we saw a Democrat, unseated incumbent who had been leading the steel workers in New York. He had only spent $153 on his election. You know, so again, it's about, we have to ask Black women to run, and that's what we do. And then we wrap supports around them and then remind them that, yes, it's okay if you need to get security because you're going to get death threats. Yes, it's okay to take care of yourself and to tell people you can't call my phone all day and night and only bring problems to me that you don't bring to my white counterparts. Because let's be clear, when a Black woman does get elected, we take her all our problems. Hello, Vice President Kamala Harris. And so there's something about that needs to be said around, we need to ask Black women, and because Black men feel good about running for office, you know, they have their networks. I love my Black men. I'm married to a Black man. I got a son, you know, and so I love my Black men, but again, we have to get to a place where we routinely ask Black women to run for office as a way of saying, I see your leadership, I value your leadership, and you deserve good things too.
We ask Black women for everything but to run for election. I just want to make sure y'all got that one, because the gems, like, I'm making that a t-shirt. Like, that has to be it.
I'll buy one. Sign me up. I want to buy the first one.
You buy or you make them, because then we can
I'll send you one.
Campaign. There we go. Like,
I got you. But I mean, I share all that to say, you know, we have to, you know, a lot of times we just accept that bad things happen to Black people and that's just the way it is. But we also have to believe that Black women and Black people deserve good things, whether you've earned it or not, because that's what white privilege is. You know, white people accept that they deserve good things, whether they've earned it or not. And so we have to, again, internalize that everything we're saying, voting, you know, starting your own business, being an entrepreneur, whatever you're doing, do it for the good of our communities, do it for the good of our people. Because what you'll find is that that's where we get the transformational change. Because when our Black entrepreneurs do well, they become donors to our Black candidates. And when our Black candidates get elected, they change policy that helps our community leaders. Everything feeds one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually just gonna say to all your points, Ruby, it's just like it all works together and it's a multi-pronged attack. Like Ernest was also saying, it takes all of us in every industry, in every place and position of any sort of power to mobilize that and use it toward like good. And I think that in that way that you're speaking about it, you know, though I might not be, you know, the best and well-versed in political, you know, jargon and whatnot, but I do know that I have a purpose to, you know, forward a more authentic message through music and push that towards people and get those people who are going viral on TikTok to be using music and stuff that feeds and feels things. And it all really does come together, I think, in a beautiful way when we're all unified and looking towards the same mission, which is just overall just liberation, Black liberation, imagining future where we have access to that utopia that we want, to that wonderful future that we really like, that we see. So I was just like, when you say that, I was like, yes, like it all intersects, and everybody that puts in the work, like it all comes through. So I feel like pushing it at every level that you possibly can is really important. And that's to the, I guess the original question asked too, like, yeah, that's the reason why I feel like it's important to be involved, because you never know, like that extra bit, that extra little thing that you need to get over the hump. You never know, like, if you were that person to push it over. And there's no skill too small or too weird. Like, so you always got to get in, put your hands in and just kind of get to it and aid the people who are constantly asking for the help and being behind them and empowering them, Black women, and pushing that forward. So echo, ditto, all that. I'm hearing it, and yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. And all elections are won by like a shred of a margin, right? So like every vote really does matter, and it really is important to support people who are running when their values align with yours. But you segued us perfectly, Christian. It's almost like you have the script in front of you, because my next question is for Kristina. Speaking of future, you describe yourself as a social futurist. I want you to delve into that deeper and explain what that means and how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think actually aligns with some of the answers from the last question as well, with looking at our collective responsibility in designing a more equitable tomorrow. And so that's my personal mission, right? And I know that I have a gift of cultivating community. And so through that gift, I help in bringing people into the collective responsibility and helping them to see that it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be scary. They don't have to solve all of the world's problems themselves. But when we all do our piece of the puzzle, then like we make a really beautiful picture because it's a collection, right? It's a collective action. And so when I think of the framework of being a social futurist, my expertise is people. I upskill people skills. I am someone that centers community over self. And when I think about tomorrow and I think about the future, I'm creating a world where people find a sense of belonging when they may not have had that experience as their reality in present and past time. So as a social futurist, I am designing a future where society is one where everyone sees themselves reflected, heard, and valued. With the understanding that trauma is intergenerational and we pass it down in our DNA, I also believe that our healing can be intergenerational as well. And so in my walk in today's era, my hope is that when I enter spaces, I am one that reflects a welcoming spirit where people innately feel a sense of belonging and safety when I am present. And with that experience from like an initial encounter with me, my hope is that as we continue to build relationship with each other over time, that those skill sets and those practices are picked up and we just end up, like creating this like ripple effect where our society is full of social futurists because we're all doing our part in the collective responsibility to create a more equitable tomorrow.
That's beautiful. And I feel like that's so lovely put because it just feels just so accessible to literally everyone and anyone. People, So I'm really feeling that.
People.
Yeah.
I heard a quote earlier this week and it was like, we're all just winging it. Like every day, everyone wakes up to a new day. Like none of us have done that day before. We're all winging it. Like it doesn't matter what the thing is, we're all figuring it out as we go. And it's like, oh yeah, like, I don't know. I kind of get like solace from knowing other people are in similar situations as me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's less lonely that way.
I appreciate the fact that you're a visionary without saying you're a visionary. I think the whole fact that we need to develop a movement, a community, a beloved community that has horizontal relationships spread all over the place. And we don't need perhaps I'm wrong, but we don't need to sit together and share by words what our vision is. But I think the collective input and the energy that we give together develops that push and that movement forward. So I appreciate that notion of looking to the future and envision it and carrying out that by winging it and doing what we can from moment to moment, from day to day, without having the blueprint or the formula, but just getting out there and doing our utmost best on a day-to-day basis.
What's that mean? Like, I did my best. Like that's literally all. That's all we have to do. Just try your best, and then trust other people are also trying their best. And it's like, cool. Now we look at the beautiful energy that we've all cultivated because we tried. Like there was some sort of action. It's the laws. It's the laws of attraction. It's the laws of how the world works, right? There is a energetic pool and relationship and how we operate in the world. And so naturally in exuding an energy out, there is going to be an energy that comes back. And so like, let's all collectively work towards putting the same sort of energy towards the same goal, right? Because then it benefits all of us in the same way over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just have to say this conversation is reminding me of like hope and optimism, which are things that like are typically lagging in a lot of like political spaces, especially on the left. There's always like this depleted sense of, oh, you know, what's the point? What are we going to do? This like sense of dejection. And I think that like, although things can be really dreary and exhausting, the minute we let go and say, I'm done, and just approach everything with this cynical energy, we're never going to get anywhere, right? So, and I think like for me, I've been working in politics since college, right? And people who don't work in politics just don't get it. Like, why would anyone want to work in this space? But I have a lot of faith and hope, and not just in the work that I can do, but in the work that other people can do. And having faith that like everyone wants the same things and everyone needs the same thing. Everyone has the right to housing. Everyone has the right to clean water. Everyone has the right to healthcare, right? And it's like, if we don't continuously push for these things, we're not going to get it. It's not going to come with ease, right? But I think it's a fight worth fighting. So I really appreciate that sentiment, Kristina. Christian, I want to hand it off to you because you're clearly an incredibly talented artist, multi-talented, but you also went to a school, from my understanding, you met Kristina at Rice, and it's a very STEM-focused school, but you decided to pursue a very creative career path, and you've done very well in it. And I want to ask you, what encouraged you to kind of go against the grain, which is similar to what we're talking about, is this push, this fight to keep going forward? Where did you get that perseverance from? And what gave you the courage?
Wow. That's a big question. And honestly, I think that I find the answer every day that I live, and that I carry it forward. Kind of like what Kristina was saying, I also am winging it. I have visions, I got goals and stuff that I want to reach, but from, I guess, conception of the idea of like, I'm gonna be a musician while I'm studying my sports management, minor in business, just like going to class every day and like thinking, oh, I need to make sure I have this internship lined up. I think that like in the earliest stages, it was like you were saying, Mayor, like a glimmer of hope. And I was like, you know what? Like, y'all listen to my music? Okay, let me see what can happen here. So I think I slowly just continued to put more stock and invest in myself more and more. And I think that what gave me the courage was confronting the fact that like it's I had a couple of people that talked to me. One, first off, shout out to my mom. Like, she's a very talented and gifted musician, and she told me that if she had the opportunity to go back and do, and pursue her dreams and push forward and see that come to pass, that she would. And I heard that sentiment echo from another one of my professors who was like, yeah, I was in a band and we were really doing stuff and I stopped. And he just kept telling me, I got the sentiment that like the time that you have right now is extremely valuable. The opportunities that await you if you go at it 100% are extremely valuable. And all of this I'm hearing while I'm just like, everybody landing their big consulting jobs and their oil and gas jobs. And I'm sitting here like, I'm gonna go home for a year and I'm gonna figure this out. So I think that the courage came from listening to the wisdom of the people who have come before me and hearing them tell me basically like, okay, number one, yes, what you have is special and it deserves to be shared with the world. Hearing that feedback from people early on was really helpful. But I think in the second half of that, it was just like, after listening to them, it was looking myself in the mirror each day and saying, you can do this, you got this. And I think that I went from a very like, you can do this to, yo, I got it on lock. Like, I'm doing this. I wake up every day. This is my passion. I pursue it. But I think that it would reduce it to something a little too small to say that I just like was just feeling courageous. I'm gonna jump out on faith. It was such a careful process. January of my senior year versus May of my senior year of college, completely different Christians. I was like, I'm gonna get a job and do this specific thing. Versus May, it was like, look, we're gonna shoot the shot and see what happens at this point. you know, and I mean, even throughout that year, as things continue to fall into place and stuff continue to align. So I absolutely feel like the courage just kind of came from just keeping at it and seeing that like the data was looking up. So yeah.
Consistency.
Yes, consistency.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Ernest, I want to ask you, since we're on the topic of creating and what that's been like, you're finished writing 2 books, right? A memoir as well as a book of short stories and poetry, which is a creative task in of itself. What has that been like for you? What encouraged you / inspired you to start writing?
I want to go back to what Christian said about having the passion and then having a positive reinforcement and what he says and what he loved to do, being given positive feedback, and then taking a dive and going into it. So in a way, that's kind of my pathway too. I had a passion for writing, but I felt like I wasn't worthy of my word being shared with others. But I kept dabbling at it, and then finally, I'm talking to my family and realizing that my story is worth being told to my children and to my grandchildren and to my community began to resonate with me. And I was in a healing circle in Dallas, run by Jerry Tello from Los Angeles, California. And everybody had to tell their story. And there were about 15 of us in the circle. And when we took a break, a couple of people came up to me and just kind of gave me some feedback, you know, saying, "Why don't you write? You know, and why don't you tell this story?" And I said, "Well, I don't, you know, I'm comparing myself to others, and look, I'm not that person, you know." So that having a sort of support from family and from friends and neighbors to say, "We'll support you. You know, what kind of help do you need?" And that kind of encouraged me too. So having your voice heard and then having support resonated to you and directed to you, all helped me to get started. But just feeling the need that all these years I've worked in youth organizations from 1984 to 2015 in Houston and with the Fifth Ward Enrichment Program. And none of those young men, our target was young men helping to become positive, responsible, caring young men engaged in their community. My story was not told to them. I said, "Look, let me hear your story and I'll try to translate it and help you what I can." So one of the young men is in this group today, just kind of reflecting some of the things we dropped in resonate with them. And so I've just begun to realize that there is some value, there is some positive repercussions that can come from your presence and your word and your story. What took the icing off the cake was all these years doing community organizing work in the 60s and 70s and 80s. There was a strong separation between community organizers and artists. So there was a division of labor where community organizers, you do your thing, artists over here, y'all do y'all thing. And it's like we had a perspective that artists were we was like trying to organize cats. You know, you can't, everybody's so individualistic and has their own way and all that. So there was a strong wall of separation. But in 2016, I became a curator with a neighborhood organization called Academia Theater Company. It was run by Latino men and women and want to tell the story of people of color and get their word out and their vision out and have people whose lives connected to that story get more connected with them and the community. So as a curator for what they call community action, my job was to try to bring the theater to the community and try to bring the community to the theater. And in the process of that, also work with young people to help them become able to become more true to their calling to organize and connect with others too. So those kind of things just kind of resonated with me and seeing how this theater company telling stories from the Latino and Black and Latin American perspective was felt and realized in the various communities and how people responded to it positively. and the whole fact of healing being a part of that. So some of the stories being told were very traumatic based stories of people who had hard lives and maybe didn't survive. And so out of that struggle to tell these stories, we also developed a healing circle and healing circles. And so I pray that that's still going on in Dallas, and maybe not in the form we envisioned, but the individuals who are part of that healing circle have branched out to the theater, to the community, to their jobs, and to their social groups, and they are conducting in their own ways healing circles. So I heard somebody say otherwise that we have, I think it was Ruby said that we have intergenerational trauma, but we also have a process for intergenerational healing. So I think that's the call today. And so my book, I hope, will speak to some of those things, that no matter what you come through, there's a hope and there's an optimism there, and there's a learning lesson that you can share with others. So we can see what's happening then, it's happening, and what's happening now, have those conversations and spark hopefully some networks and community building at the same time through the book tours and through the community discussions we're having through the book. So I'm more encouraged now than I was 5 years ago. It's 180 degrees for me. It wasn't a short term as Christians from January to May, but it's an ongoing process, and I'm feeling more to trust myself and to trust my community, that we may have all different kinds of experiences, but there's some bottom lines and some commonness we can connect on, and those things can be positive, and we can build on them and help push and develop and lift up this beloved community.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad you shared. And on that topic, I want to ask you, Ernest, because you have really been on the front lines of like the civil rights movements and human rights as well. And do you think that progress towards equality and justice have been made in you?
I'm having a difficulty hearing you. Sound like the sound went out. Maybe frozen. Is it that cold there? Breathe now.
Yeah, we seem to be having some technical difficulties. I'm texting her real quick.
Okay, well, I think I can have the gist of what she was saying now. I'll try to deal with it as best I can. Yes, we have made progress, and I'm not ashamed of the progress we made. We've come a long way, but the fact is we have such a very long way to go still. Every step we take forward is challenged, and with efforts to suppress us, to turn us back, to give up, to co-opt us, or to buy us out. All those things are continual. We face issues of trust because we've seen so much betrayals, but we have to find a way to march forward. Some people are really justified, I feel, in having skepticism or cynicism or doubts or even just disregard for the Black movement and the struggle. Some of those people who have suffered trauma, like beatings or losing their family members, being separated from them, or some who've been in prison and been brutalized because they were organizers in the community, but when they came to prison, they were considered the worst scum of all. Drug dealers and pimps had higher category than community organizers. So there was kind of like an X on your back in the prison system. So I talked to those young men and women as well who've gone through trauma, who've experienced losses and separation. And I can understand that. So my feeling is not to give up on them, to keep the door out, to find a way to encourage them and support them ongoing. And there's another group of people who I have less regard for. Those are persons who just have never had any involvement in the struggle, have always kind of just looked out for themselves only. But I feel even with those groups of persons, individuals who put themselves above others, there's going to be something that hits you in your face someday that's going to snap you out of there, wake you up. So I'm not going to write off even those. And so we have a whirlpool of people that are out there that need to hear and see and feel and be supported and be not wiped off or crossed off the list. And so I think every life counts, it's valuable, can be a source of energy and hope for the community. And when they make that transformation from being a pimp or a robber or a drug dealer and become a community organizer like Malcolm X, that story needs to be told and see how those transformations can be made. So I'm hopeful about our future. I know I may be drifting from where your question is, but I'm optimistic because I've seen the youth today in 2019, 2020, 2021, the Black Lives Movement, the struggle against police brutality, people who've never been involved and never taken the streets, may have perhaps never voted before, step out there and be able to navigate their way around the tricks and traps and the barricades that have been put up there. And my problem is that let's not just move on emotion. Let's find a way to sustain that struggle and build it and organize and build institutions that support and help empower others to go that path sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Something I've really been meditating on is diversifying impact. Like the way that we are used to within our own sphere of influence, impact others doesn't have to be the only way that we impact others forever, right? Like, it's like we're all multifaceted people, right? Like some days we're focused on playing guitar and other days we're focused on coloring inside the lines. Like we have different skill sets, we've got different talents that we're able to offer the world. And I think the opportunity for us to tap into different parts of ourselves to diversify how we impact others is really exciting. Like Ruby, I'm sure a few years ago wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to join the political sphere, right? Like that was something you're like, I see a problem here, so I'm going to insert myself. And like you diversified your impact. Like, so that's something I definitely would love to encourage everyone with is looking at where they currently are and then looking at what other opportunities they have to reach a whole other audience or expand upon or collaborate within the audience that they have already. There's really great opportunities for us to do great work. And an example of that is like, I don't work directly in a political space. I work within organizations. I help organizations improve their culture. But I was selected to get into a political tech accelerator and get funding from a political tech accelerator because they recognize that the work that we're doing to shape organizational culture has personal impact on individuals that then go back out into this in society and makes them like think more progressively, which then goes into politics. And so it's just like there's different ways to have your sphere of influence. I was an educator for 13, 14 years prior to entering tech. I realized like, oh, well, I know the research. I know the academic-y stuff on how people work and how to socialize. And also I know the historical context of this country. So let me change the framework and speak the language that makes sense to this demographic over here within the business field. And now I'm able to translate, right? I get to be this conduit of information in a completely different sector that I had no clue and had no like inkling on my life trajectory radar that I would have been in when I was going to get all of my degrees and schooling and doing my field work, you know? So just like, I don't know, I just want to like encourage people to switch it up a bit, you know, like just throw your hat in different rings and see what comes out of it. You might really surprise yourself and the world may benefit really well from it too.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my internet just mysteriously disappeared. So sorry for the technical difficulties, but Kristina, I did catch the last end of what you said. And I have to agree with you. I mean, it's really important. And I think a lot of younger people are starting to realize that like you don't have to commit yourself to like one career or one venture. You can explore your interest and do different things. And it doesn't have to be something that you majored in. It doesn't have to be something that you were brought up to do. You can explore and you can take advantage of all of the knowledge that's out there and really challenge yourself to do something differently. Yeah, but
Yes.
Christian, did you have something to add to that?
I did, because I was thinking like, honestly, I think it, like Kristina was saying about diversifying the attack, it's just like, I guess, any sort of money management, any just sort of ideas of growing plants. It's like you want to give yourself as many chances to succeed as possible. And you want to be able to fortify yourself with all the different ways to interact with your environment and be adaptive, be like flexible to be able to change if the problem changes, when the problem changes. And I feel like what you're saying, like basically saying like, we are in a time where you don't just pick one thing. And the thing is, we've never picked one thing technically. I think that what society did was made it to where they shrink you down, and it's easier to go at you, to take you out, to remove you from the space, because they know that you're going to work in this specific industry. They know that you're going to want to go down this specific career path. But if you're unpredictable, if you're flexible, if you jump back and forth, the way that you get to the success, the way that you get to the change, it gives you such a better chance to really push through that. So I feel like absolutely, like diversifying the attack, pushing through, having just a multi-faceted approach to problem solving is always going to be like the best way. And I say the best way, but it's always going to be a very, very important way to continue forward, because we need specialists. We need people who are locked in on one thing. Absolutely. Not telling everyone to do a billion things, but I think like specifically, especially like I said, coming from someone who 4 years ago was like, I'm going to do marketing. It's going to be fun. I'm going to do all these sorts of, sports, and I'm going to be doing, it's going to be so much fun. And then jumping into music, knowing that that was my passion. And then now looking at myself talking with really wonderful, like distinguished Black folks, me also one of them. Hey,
Let 'em know.
you know what I'm saying? Like really sitting in that and holding that in this moment reminds me that there are no boundaries, there are no limits to what you can achieve and where you can achieve what you need to be doing. So I'm like all in on multi-prong, all in on like changing things. So yeah, that was what I was wanting to add, Mary.
No, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, it's definitely important because historically in this country, right, you're kind of stability, and oftentimes stability very can be quite rigid, right? It is nice to kind of have something to depend on to build up a career, but there's so much to explore, and we need to allow ourselves and allow other people to explore different facets of themselves, different interests and hobbies that they have. So I think it's really important. I want to ask you, Ruby, because politics can be a really like insular environment. And a lot of positions in politics, especially on campaigns, which are like, depending on the scale of the campaign, but a lot of them are like these really big, not so well-oiled machines, but you have a lot of people operating and you have a role, and a lot of them can sound very similar, like advisor, data director. What's the difference between that and like a regional organizing director? What does that really mean? But one role that a lot of people hear about and are familiar with is a campaign manager. And it's an essential role. But I want you to delve deeper because you have a lot of history and you have a very interesting take on why campaign management is really important, and especially why Black folks should take an interest in pursuing the campaign manager role specifically. And what does that mean for the campaign?
Yep. So I think this segues really well into everything that folks just shared. So I had the chance to serve as a campaign manager to a Black woman who won the Democratic nomination for United States Senate in a state that was won by Donald Trump. So it's not many of us, right? It's not many of us. The thing about a campaign manager is you are a creator. I'll be very honest. I think the most transformative, amazing, impactful campaign managers, especially if they're candidates, you got a great candidate who is just a person people really are inspired by, connected with, you are a creator. I specialize, so I always work with Black women who pretty much don't have the institutions behind them. Like the party might not be behind them. I usually am getting involved really, really early. All of my women come from working class backgrounds. So for context, I live in Memphis. The median household income is $35,000. When I was a school administrator, the neighborhood I worked in, 38127 zip code had infant mortality rates that look a lot like developing nations. The neighborhood was 11 miles from downtown. Most of my students and their families had never been to downtown Memphis. So when you talk about like NBA, like the Grizzlies and all, never seen it. Like we have the Cardinals, they're like minor league team plays here, never been to the stadium. We're home to FedEx. So there's just this gulf, right? In terms of experiences and people who tend to be campaign managers versus the communities and stuff that are actually being represented by whoever's running. And so for me, being a campaign manager as a mom of 2 kids who were under 5 during COVID, to a Black woman who herself was not making more than $8 an hour. Her house was in foreclosure. My candidate did not have a car when she won her nomination. Wow. And I share that because, if we don't have campaign managers who are willing to believe and bet on Black women, that things are not going to change. I mean, you are the person who is making stuff happen because your candidate just can't do everything. Mm-hmm. The other part of that is a lot of times Black women are not considering campaign manager roles because a lot of times we don't know what the salaries pay. So newsflash, a campaign manager at a really high level can make $15,000 a month. And when you talk about the average Black person who typically has student loan debt, who might come from a working class background, that is transformational money. These Bloomberg campaigns paying $20K a month, $30K a month, that's transformational money. Black people are currently locked out of that. And you don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have a certain, Joe Trippi is the best example. If you read his backstory, right? This guy left college and has been running presidential campaigns since the 70s, right? And when you think about, we could have more Black millionaires in this country because our presidential campaigns are billion-dollar businesses. And yet again, when you look up and down the ranks, you could have thousands of employees on these campaigns and very, very few of them are Black. So I say all that to say, in my experience, one, it's part of the reason why we created Elect Black Women. I saw firsthand how people treated my candidates. I see firsthand how people treat my candidates. People don't care. My candidates could ask for, the same donor will max out to a white man with very little information on him. And we'll get that same Black woman running for a very similar race, $100. But the mail costs the same. Digital ads cost the same. So I say that to say, I always encourage Black women to take on operative roles because again, you are starting a catering business in your house, you selling paparazzi jewelry, you got a mobile detailing, you selling bundles, you're doing all of this. You can manage a campaign.
The bundles.
You can manage it. And let me tell you, you can manage a campaign. And a lot of times Black women have such strong entrepreneurial spirits, but we never think about translating that into politics and not realize some of these political jobs, they are 6 figures strong and some of these people don't even work 12 months of the year. And so when you talk about needing something flexible, you're always going to have Senate races. You're always going to have congressional races. So I share that experience, hoping that I can inspire another woman of color to be a campaign manager, to put her name in the hat. You don't have to be perfect. That was my first, race at that level. I'd always worked down ballot. But we also proved what was possible in a state where, like I said, it went Trump. It's a red state. But again, you have to be willing to put yourself out there and just know that every leadership experience you've had, whether it's leading in your church, I do a ton of volunteerism, hundreds of hours a year. All of that counts towards preparing you for whatever that next level will be. So don't discredit your experiences thinking I have to be perfect, which a lot of times Black people and Black women will think, like I have to be overqualified. And a lot of times you just got to believe in yourself and shoot your shot because you don't know what will manifest if you believe in you. And that's literally what that experience transformed my life. And it allowed me to do the work that I do now and support hundreds of Black women who have been on the ballot since we started and will be on the ballot, through the midterms.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Ruby. Because when we spoke about campaign management, and you pointed one thing that I never really thought about, which is when you're a campaign manager, you're able to open up so many other roles for other people. And you, in a lot of ways, are there to hire people, and you can hire people that look like you, which isn't often. And people don't talk about the economic take of joining politics, especially campaigns, where not only is the pay so varied, but as well as the time period. Not everyone can afford to live in Wisconsin for 3 months and then move to Texas for 3 and then Nevada, depending on like what kind of election year it is. And so it's a job that isn't necessarily inclusive of a lot of people, but nonetheless, it's really essential in forming a campaign and a job in politics / career. I want to move on to opening up the floor for the audience and participants to ask questions. Feel free either to drop them in the chat, and Kristina is monitoring, so we can pull questions from there. But if you'd like to unmute yourself and just go aloud, please feel free to.
Hi, my name is Jovan Ross. I just wanted to ask Ms. Ruby about the campaign managers. How often does campaign managers turn into candidates?
Good question.
I think I'm amongst the few that say yes to going from campaign manager, but I will say this. The campaign manager is, I mean, that role gives you a taste of exactly what is going to happen, but it's not your name on the yard sign, right? Additionally to what Mar shared, like it gives you a chance to hire people, to create opportunities. You get to determine strategy. You get to determine which voters get spoken to, what events your candidate is going to. I mean, it's a business. Every campaign has an EIN number. So I say all that to say, I tell everyone, get involved on a campaign, go after a senior staffer role. I got very fortunate. I'm in a place right now, Democratic politics is shifting to, we primarily want to spend on flipping seats from red to blue. And so if you're in a community that is primarily conservative, you're going to have a lot of campaign opportunities coming up because that's where the money is moving between now and the presidential in 24. And so I say all that to say, even if you work a down ballot candidate's race as a campaign manager, from that point on, once you do a good job with that, you're going to get calls forever and ever in a day. And you just keep moving up from there. And as long as you sustain those relationships, then you will find that you won't have work gaps and you'll be able to say, okay, no, I'm going to take a campaign here, or I will be a senior advisor so I don't have the travel piece, but you're still a part of making decisions. Or you can even move up to what's called a general consultant or a GC, where all you're doing is handling like the television buy and things like that. And so where you live doesn't matter. So it can definitely be a ramp to a lot of different things, but very few we're a small group that go from campaign manager to candidate for sure.
Well, nobody's speaking, huh?
There's some questions coming in.
We got some in the chat.
Yeah, I think we got a question in the chat. Question to all members: using one word, how do you describe your approach to Black futures?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. Question to all the panel members: using one word, how do you describe your approach to Black futures?
Confidence. Confidence.
Yeah. I feel like I'll go ahead and say this out loud. For me, I think my approach to it is commitment and consistency, and continue to expand my mind. I feel like social media and the news and general things have a very powerful force of squeezing and making it feel like there's just one way that life is going and that there's only one way that things can work out. So I feel like I have to always continue to push my imagination to continue to envision hope and envision a space, especially for myself in this music industry, like navigating through different changes and whatnot, and just imagining that there is a space for me to continue to expand and open it up for the youth and the people that follow me, myself included. So, but I definitely feel like it's consistency and it's committed to that and just continuing to dream as big as possible, because I feel like once you take dreaming away from like a group of people, that's it, that's the force, that's the life force of everything. So I feel like keeping that creative mind pushing and open is my biggest thing.
I can chime in also. I think a word for me is aspire, simply aspire. And by aspiring, no matter, even if you suffer downfalls or setbacks, you can learn from those. There are opportunities to grow. They are blessings in disguise, and there's a silver lining there. So continue to aspire and work toward your goals. Don't give up.
My one word is transformation. I think that there's like personal transformation and collective transformation that will occur for our Black futures.
I need 2 words. I need 2. I'm oscillating between relentless pursuit, which for those who worked in education, you might remember that from
Yeah.
before. There you go. A few people.
That's
"Oh, I
funny.
see
I
where
haven't
we're
heard
going."
that in a while.
Relentless pursuit, because it hits a little different for, so and then just like optimistic revolutionary. I feel relentless pursuit because I just don't see myself doing anything else. Hold on, my son is.
He's like, he got one. What's your word?
He is saying a word, but I muted because that is he is. Hold on, y'all. I got to be a Black mama. Hold on.
I have another one that came into mind. Radical joy.
Yes.
Operating from radical joy.
Yes. It's rebellious.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you definitely have to have this orientation, like you're not going to give up. Because I mean, we're up against systemic oppression. I mean, 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. I mean, we still live in a country where, there are just whole neighborhoods where there are no people of color, whole communities that still have, that just haven't acknowledged the history of our country. People just don't believe like the Holocaust is real or slavery, and so you just have to have this hope, this joy, this relentless optimism, because at every turn, there's going to be someone saying, oh, this shouldn't be, or this is out of place, or this is not right. But I just couldn't see myself doing anything else. Like I said, I was a former administrator, and I get headhunted, people call me for a lot of stuff, but this work, loving on Black women and supporting Black women candidates, it's the work I know I need to do. My life would not, I don't know what my life would be if I could not do this work.
That's wonderful. And you need to do the work, right? It's so essential that we have women who look like us in positions of power and who have influence in those positions. It's really essential. I want to end by asking all of you a question, which is, what advice would you give your younger self? Yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you.
I'll start off since I'm just the elder in the room. But I would venture to say, be patient, be more patient with yourself, be more compassionate with yourself, love yourself, trust yourself, and you'll go far with that spirit. There's I don't know, the young people I see today and around, have a chance to communicate with, sometimes have a short-term view of things, want things in a hurry, want to see things change immediately. In my day, we were young people too, who still ended a war in Vietnam and brought about some justice in the Deep South.
You've got a generational flex.
So, I'm just saying to young people that this is a long fight, and we need to just continue our part, that we stand on the shoulders of people who came before us, who gave their all, and now it's on our shoulders to go forward and to continue to build. So we used to label all elder Black men who seem to compromise themselves as Uncle Toms. We can learn from anyone, and we should not just annihilate their presence in our lives or write them off either. So I think our thing about freedom now was what propelled us far. We wanted it right then, right there. And here it is, 2022, and we're not there yet. So we have to see that strides are being made, setbacks also occur, but the forward motion continues. So don't give up. I'm gonna keep saying that one.
Well, I guess I'll go and say, so I feel like I think I'm the youngest person on this panel. I feel like even in this short amount of time, I do wish that I could go back and give myself a little bit of advice just to push the ball forward a little bit. But I think that the first thing that I would say is to myself is just believe in yourself and bet on yourself early and lean into confidence. I felt like the world beat down on me and told me, and I feel like many other Black folks, that they weren't enough, or that they didn't have enough, or that they needed to be a certain thing. But I feel like, yeah, number one would totally say like bet early and often, and like have that confidence. And number two is obligation only kills life force. So if you don't feel like being there, and you don't think that it's serving you, and that it's serving your community, or serving your mission or your purpose. Like, one thing that I wish that I go back and say back then when I was at Rice trying to get a degree so I could look like the first gen Black kid that made it from a tough university and pushed out, to all that obligation, I would just say like, no, thank you, as early and as often as possible, because each step is resistance. Each moment is like a rebellion against that obligation, and like, oh, I have to do something. And I feel like I totally would push back on that as early as possible, because I feel like it benefited me. It benefits me a lot more each day that I continue to practice it.
Like, mine kind of aligns with that in listening to intuition. Like, and when we talk about telling our like past self, I mean like telling my yesterday self, right? Like constantly needing to learn, right, from mistakes and everything. It's a constant evolution. But one thing I'm personally trying to focus on is recognizing that I have an inner knowing. I have not recognizing, because I do know it, but giving that voice, this is what it is. My intuition needs to be louder than the voice in my head.
Yeah.
Like, whatever I think has to be less prioritized than what my inner wisdom knows. And so that means that sometimes that intuition can be a whisper, and that whisper needs to be louder than whatever I'm telling myself about which way to go. And I think life would be a lot easier if I listened to that spiritual guide a lot more. So that's how I'm moving forward. And also to give myself grace, which I think is kind of what we all are saying in different ways, is we're humans, and humans make mistakes, period. This is what happens. And then you wake up the next day and you try it again, because we're all winging it.
Advice I would give to my younger self would be break up with him.
That always. Just say no.
I don't even care if he's watching. He might be. He still lurks. But I mean, I just spent too long dating someone who gave me more baggage than I probably needed. And I always say that, and it's funny, but I just see so many women, particularly Black women, we center the institution of marriage, kids, I mean, we are looking at all these material things, boxes we need to check. I got the degree, I went to grad school, I got good credit, I bought a house, we're doing all of these things. And I stayed with that person because I just thought, and it turned out fine. I mean, I'm married, I love my husband, he's great, but when I look back on that time, like you can be with someone and you think that you're doing the right thing because you have a heart of service, you're a servant leader, you're an empathetic leader, but really you need to walk away from people who are not pouring into you, people who don't speak kindly to you, people who don't treat you kindly. And so I say break because it's funny, but the reality of it is that I see too many women in particular staying in situations where there is domestic violence, where there is emotional abuse, verbal abuse, et cetera. And we stay because we think it's a sign of love and loyalty and commitment. And so that's the advice I always give, particularly for women, because, sometimes there's just a shame that we carry, and it'll keep us in a situation that is not healthy for us. And so I always like to speak to folks. I know that men can experience domestic violence, but I always like to speak to folks like, if someone is not loving and taking care of you and speaking kindly to you every single day and is not positive in their interactions with you, that's not healthy, that's not powerful, and that's not transformative. So break up with them.
And there's a tie there between what Ruby, you're saying and what Kristina's saying, right? That intuition being a whisper, right? But like hoping that the volume on your intuition is turned up so that you can get out of a situation, not necessarily the latter, but earlier about breaking up with someone, that knowing that when something doesn't feel right to you, when it doesn't suit you, when it's not helping you grow, that it's time to call it quits, right? So looks like Charles has a question for us, and Catherine. Charles, would you like to ask?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The issue about how do I feel about our future? I have the utmost of confidence that we can accomplish whatever we want to accomplish. And I have that confidence from experience. I've been in some of the worst situations you can ever imagine. And when you have a brain, you can figure a way out of those situations. The main thing we have to do is organize. Organize, 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 organize. Because without organization, we're kind of stuck, a state of arrest. There's no motion, there's no movement, no progress. And organizing means that we have to take chances. We have to challenge the system. And my main focus over the last few years has been the criminal justice system, the last 25 years. And some of the most oppressive laws have been passed to incarcerate people for little or nothing over the last 25 years. They've even taken away the jurisdiction of federal judges to review state convictions. And that's a bad thing. And they put time limits on when you can go to court and what you can, and restrictions on what you can bring to court. And Bill Clinton was the worst president in the last 50 years. We have to educate ourselves, educate our people, and use the world as a university, wherever we are. I've learned in my life how to grow anything I want to grow. I've taught myself horticulture. I've taught myself auto mechanics. I've taught myself to be a telecom communications manager. I worked in the telecom company as a manager of technical services. And I had no background. I just found literature and books and applied myself and was very successful at it too. So I believe that Black people, any people, it doesn't make no difference who they are, if they just take advantage of what's near you, what information is near you, what information you got access to, and use it in a positive way, we got no problems in the future. That's it.
Thank you for sharing, Charles. I want to read a few of the other words that really stood out to me in the chat before we get to Catherine's question. I remember one of you said aspire, which I love that word. It's very important to look up and out. But some of the other ones that stood out to me were obligation only kills life force. Let's see, empathy, tenacity, commitment, resilience, all very on trend with what we've been speaking about tonight. But yeah, let's hand it over to Catherine. Is Catherine not there? Okay. Do we have any other questions, comments?
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes. I just heard, which I thought was the answer to many things that we're seeking. And I'm a witness to this. My name is Ed Smith. I'm a retired professor at the University of Buffalo. I taught at several universities around the country. I started a African American theater back in Buffalo, New York years ago. I can say I was a police officer. I was a little gangster that carried a pistol around before I became a policeman. I did all of this. I'm stuck to musicians. I love jazz. I listen to the John Coltrane's. I host a jazz show in Buffalo, New York for 4 years. And I did all of these things, looking, seeking. And the way this happened to me, and I hear all of you young people, and you're right, the way this happened to me, there was brothers selling the Muslims paper, you know, the weekend. They sell them on the weekends. And I remember when I was small, and on the heading says, cigarettes is cancer. And nobody was saying that. Nobody was saying that, you know, but the Muslims. And then I started meeting some Muslims, being that I was hanging out with a lot of jazz musicians. And I found out that, you know, wow, I could be this, I could be that. Then I decided that I wanted to go to art school. I went to art school, I did paintings, I sold 2 paintings, that was good. Then I became a police, just kept moving. And I was telling him, I said, Ed, what is it that you want to do? And I wanted to be in theater. So I went into theater. And that became my bouncing ball from being a theater to a professor to a director who has directed at many of the big theaters around the country. So I'm very, very happy and delighted with where I'm at now. But what I'd like to do is just pass this on to young folks. When I had the Black Drama Workshop, we had young people coming there. I have some of those young people are professors at some of the universities around the country. And when I hear from them, you don't know, that just turned me on. Or even when I'm sitting here watching television and I see an actor that I directed at one of the theaters around the country, you know, I'm calling my wife, look, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I'm so happy about that. But I think that working together that way and working with one another is so important, you know, and you all are young, you know. Ernest, who is my brother, we go back. When Ernest and I got together, we sat, we read, we talked, we discussed, and we were always busy. He was bringing me this to read. I was bringing him that to read. So I think that's what we have to start doing with one another. You're young, we could see more Black shows on television that I could see when I was growing up. Some of the shows, and then some of the shows I questioned, you know, but yet, you know, we're there. You know, we can become directors, producers, you know, we can become owners of theaters. Those things are happening. And when I look at you all, I'm going to be there rooting you on because as I remember. And I just wanted to share that with you because I listened to you all night and I was very impressed. So this, as I said, keep on pushing.
Even with you, Ernest.
Thank you.
I don't know what our timeline frame is. I hope we have time for another area. I know in our initial hypothesis, we talked about government, art, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked it all about technology, and I'm probably the least knowledgeable about it than anybody in the room. But to me, I'm very apprehensive about the technology and the role it plays in our society. There's a revolution going on that's disruptive, that's hurtful and out of our control with artificial intelligence, biotech, all these things taking place. And I wonder if our young people can talk a little bit how we can utilize technology to our service, because right now there's entrepreneurs and technicians and engineers that have all the say so, and we don't know what the hell is going on. And I'm thinking they can, with the advance of technology, that jobs are being taken away, skills are being taken away, intrusions into our private lives are being enhanced and growing. And I wonder what our young people say about how we see use of technology in our future. That's one area, that's the elephant in the room we haven't discussed at all.
Yeah.
Somebody
Kristina, do you want to take
Wait.
it away?
Don't let I'm gonna go first because the tech people gonna talk. I'm gonna go first. Let me get my 5 minutes out real quick. So from a political perspective, COVID has been a gift, particularly for candidates who don't have resources money-wise. I would say, at least from our end, the tech acquisitions in the political space are happening as rapidly as they are in some of the other tech spaces. I think it presents a unique opportunity. One, organizations like Bluebonnet are now able to rise up and create pipelines of people of color who have technology backgrounds in a way that was not a thing for campaigns. Like that just wasn't a thing. Like I don't know too many MIS, DIS majors who knew how to go use their degree to go to politics. So I think there's like opportunity there. The other thing is from a fundraising perspective. When I ran for office, I got donations from 36 states. And so when you talk about a candidate who's trying to run as a non-institutional candidate, technology is probably the best weapon you have at your disposal, particularly, technology like social media, because it allows you to amplify your candidacy and reach donors that are not physically proximate to you. So I think it presents a unique opportunity, but conversely, it's a challenge because older Black voters, right, are still the voting bloc we need to mobilize. And, the level of engagement around technology, even in a Zoom world, 2 years and some change into the pandemic, we're still seeing, just a struggle. And so I think there's just like a gulf there that the Black community, technologists, folks on the call, folks are part of this process, this experience. I think we have a unique opportunity to address some of those in a way that's beneficial to Black people, but I think the window is closing, right? And I don't think it's a window that's going to stay open perpetually, like 20 years for us to kind of figure out how to like gain dominance in the tech space as a way to political power.
Please go ahead, Kristina, because I'm curious and I want to hear how you're like approaching it, because I definitely have thoughts as well, but I'm like just want to listen and piggyback off of that.
Okay, absolutely. So I run a revenue generating tech company, and I am super critical of technology within my particular field. So my company, Unpacking, we have a gamified learning platform, and we train organizations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So think about having a really cool gamified learning platform for adults. That's essentially it, right? And we focus on people, cultures. We're a social-based organization. Now, I can speak from the perspective also of being in the tech space and being a founder, where it's like you're constantly pitching to venture capitalists, you're trying to raise money, all of this. What happens is there's a disconnect between input and output around what the use of technology is for and why. So I've seen several white male-led diversity, equity, and inclusion companies that have completely roboticized their platforms. There's no human actual like interaction and connection in it. It's like, hey, go watch this video. Now you're not a racist. Ooh. That's essentially what we have. With my company, you're working collaborative workshops because you can't build people skills without actually interacting with other people. So for the output, what's very, very important is that you have human connection, and you've got this empathetic opportunity to actually build empathy, because you can't just do that, one, when you're working by yourself, and two, when you're just interacting with a robot. You're not going to learn about people by just interacting with robots, right? But the issue is on that input, in raising VC funding, They would rather see it be more roboticized. They would rather see the humans be removed from the experience, but that doesn't reach the goal of actually having cultural change. It reaches the check the box and say I did it goal, but it doesn't actually change human behavior. So one, that's my personal experience just as like a tech founder, specifically in the diversity and inclusion space, and some roadblocks that I have personally had just in like this fundraising journey, and trying to communicate necessity, and necessity for actual human impact rather than just, like coins into some rich white dude's pocket. The other component that I want to talk about is when we are thinking about like the metaverse, for example, what I see is great opportunity for bringing different people in different regions together to collaborate, right? I mean, just like Zoom, right? It's like we're all meeting from different zip codes and we get to engage with each other through this video camera. In the metaverse, it's a similar experience, except for you have an avatar. Where so you have like a little floating body that gets to like move around some virtual world, and engage with other people. There's a couple things that show up for me there that make me a bit weary as a social futurist, right? I'm looking at trends and signals today that help me predict where we're going for tomorrow. So when I see avatars and there's no facial expressions, they're stagnant, they're stoic. I think about what does that do for how we're developing our social emotional capacities, right? If you're growing up in an era where you're immersed in a virtual space and you're not interacting with actual body language, when that is more than 70% of how we communicate, how are you learning what human connection and interaction should actually look like? How are you learning feelings and sentiment that is more of like the soft skills? I also think about if we live in a world where there's nowhere else to colonize, so now we're going to space and we're creating virtual worlds to do so, what does that mean for people that are in lower socioeconomic status or historically marginalized within the real world? Our government's going to say, hey, homeless people, we're going to put this chip in your head because we don't want you on the streets anymore. And your body's going to float somewhere in space, but you'll still be able to live in the metaverse. Like there's a lot of like potential harm that can come. I know I'm going down a rabbit hole right now, but like, these are the things that I think about is like, how does what we're seeing in our trends and our signals within our society right now help us predict what's coming? And so when I'm looking, it's definitely a Black Mirror, right? But it's like when I'm looking around, I see some positive use cases where, hey, we're connecting people. People get to travel to go see places through virtual reality that they may not physically be able to go to. And that's so amazing. And you can see your grandmother all the way across the country and like all these other connections that are so fun. Or you can sit front row at a basketball game and not actually be there spending that a crazy amount of money on tickets, like whatever, great experiences. But those are like these interpersonal experiences. When we think about like the intersectional institutions and then how that relates into the systemic issues, what we have seen throughout history around the world is that when people are in power, have access to technologies that can dictate and influence masses, it's not typically used for good.
Yep.
So
yep.
I can only predict that it's not going to be used for good in the long run. That's what I got to say.
No, that is literally why I was like, first of all, I was like, I had to hear like from where you were coming from, because again, like Ernest, I was like, we haven't talked a whole lot about tech, and I want to hear like a little bit about that intersection, especially when it comes to how everything comes together. But that specific piece is literally like, I find myself at the exact same crux with like people talk about cryptocurrency and Web3 and NFTs and all this other stuff, and all this for the folks who are out there. It's just, again, another realm that someone has created, and they feel like it is some sort of future, and they feel like it has the right to exist in this space. And again, like Kristina was saying, it is mostly white folks. And that's the problem, is when you don't have that wealth of experience, that wealth of background, you have these people all sit in a room and create a little echo chamber where they're just like, yeah, like this is a great idea. Like, I don't think this could go wrong at all. Like, there's no problems here because they've never experienced any of those issues. Like you were saying, Ernest,
Yeah, that's
way back
pros on
earlier,
thinking about
talking about like people that never experience anything and don't really feel like it's a problem for them, how you still hold out hope. And I think that those sorts of people tend to be the people who are creating systems that impact our daily lives so deeply, so like in such a big way. So I think that, like, to your point, Ernest, in terms of how you feel like it's important to, like, what can we do, it's just, again, like Ruby was saying at the very beginning, this just, we have to show up. Like, all the people here that are like attending this panel, if you know, like, if you are a Black person in tech, or you are someone who is in tech, like, continue to search for those opportunities. If you hold power and privilege, offer those people opportunities, because what you do is you this overall, I feel like the goal of all of this is to eliminate as many blind spots as possible that shows a very complete and full and beautiful picture. Like, but the less people we have there, it's just creates this very simple, like, homogeneous picture of how the world looks. It takes out so much of it.
it's
It
like,
dilutes
right,
it.
it's like for who?
Like, for
I love
who?
that. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Like,
it's like,
I
how
was
this
like,
how the world look for who? Yeah,
for
you and your
who? For
homies.
who? Like, people don't. If
Dad.
you're not creating a world for multiple people, like,
Yeah.
in mind, I think that if you have only one type of people creating the world, as it tends to have been, like, you can't expect a super different result. So I understand the skepticism, Ernest. Like, I understand the skepticism of so many people who aren't involved in tech. But I think the direct answer is to get involved, to and for us people who know a little bit, is to talk to these people and be willing to share information and not gatekeep, like, and use super big words that are not necessary. Like, we don't have to talk about, the blockchain cryptocurrency supermarket. Just call it internet money and keep it
Yeah.
pushing. Like, it's not hard. Like, y'all are being so weird, and you keep so
You're
many
creating
people out of it
exclusionary
on
experiences for your
purpose.
language.
Right.
That's such a good, yes, it's so important.
I'm here with it. Like what you said, like, if you're talking about it in the way that it's moving and where we're going in terms of tech, this overall thing, like Kristina said, is about colonizing another space, creating another space, taking away more power from more people. And I think that if we look at it, if we look at the same type of game, we can figure out how to, like, gather a better perspective and find our spots to enter and provide the things that we do. And there's no pressure if you feel like it. That's the other thing. It's like, it's coming whether you like it or not. That's a lie. Like, we are living this life how we live it, and the reality will continue to emerge in the ways that we continue to contribute to it. So
wait, can I ask you a question about that though?
Yeah, hit me.
Because low-key, sometimes I feel like I'm in like a sim game, and I'm like, it is all happening around me, and I'm just like, I'm going to the kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, like, it's, I mean, at the top of a year ago, we weren't talking about Web3. We weren't talking about crypto the ways that we are, NFTs, metaverse. Like, that was just the 365 days ago, you guys. You know what I mean?
Well, depends on the spaces you're in.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but like, even right now,
we were talking about blockchain and crypto when I was in business school back in 2015.
Well,
and they were talking to us in B school
the
about
masses though, right? So it's like, but that's a niche. That's not like widely like adopted like conversation. But now, like, it's like you're seeing conversations on the news where they're like, yes, we do live, or Facebook changes their name to Meta, right? Wanting to capitalize on even like the use of the word. And then we are now in this space now where it's like, hey, people are making money from this thing, NFTs. And if you're not a part of it, like, you're going to get left behind, and you should know all about it already. But like, conversations about it weren't public knowledge to the larger masses until recently, like within like the last 6 months, right? And so when we're thinking about this transformational change, that means we also have to have like access. I'm a really big fan of like YouTube University. It's free. There's tons of information on Beyonce's internet. So like, tap into it. I had another point. I don't remember what it was. So I'm gonna stop talking.
No, but the question stands. You are correct. I think this is something that I actually recently listening to a podcast from Prentice Hemphill. It's called Finding Your Way. It's really good, and it featured this one author named Adrienne Maree Brown. Really, really excellent, like, wonderful, just like good podcasts, but one of the really specific things that stuck with me that I will continue to tell everybody is Adrienne Marie Brown was like, the utopia and the dystopia are happening simultaneously. Currently, we are in a world that people are capitalizing and winning and living out their dreams while people are dying and are homeless and are struggling. Right. And a lot of our worst nightmares exist while some people's wildest dreams are coming true. And I think that is the case with technology, with art, with all of that, is the fact that at this current moment, at this juncture, yes, it is like it is now reaching the masses. But what I was saying was, no matter what, that utopia, that dystopian play, the way that these things sort of interact will always exist, no matter from someone's perspective. And I think that like that's important to note, is understanding that because it is an interactive space and that we are all contributors to it, and that we basically have opportunities to be contributors in any way. I think that it's important to like identify where our communities stand and what our level of impact wants to be, which I think is everything that we've been talking about here, which is so wonderful. And then like understanding that like in the spaces where trying to convert more of those dystopian spaces into utopian spaces where you feel like, wow, this wonderful panel of people we got here and talked about real stuff. We did not agree on everything. We did not come to, conclusions about everything, but creating a space where we could have that conversation is a step towards utopia and brings us together. And all of this is on Zoom, a space where something that we haven't had this, capacity before in the past. So I think that like pulling all this together, there are really good beneficial tools, and it's up to us, the masses, to lean into the positive benefits of that and be aware of the negative benefits of, or the negative like consequences, and just like continue to create and propagate reality. Because no matter what, that still is going to be the mainstream thing, which again, I totally feel like Web3's coming, everything's coming, but yeah, like we're coming from all over, and I think that there's beauty in it.
I like that. I love what you said earlier though, about just get in it. Just get in. Get in it. Find your thing.
And Kristina, to your point, like this year more than ever, I've seen like commercials for like TurboTax and like that are talking about helping you figure out how to file your taxes when you have crypto. That's not something we've ever seen before. So there is something like really specific about what's been happening lately regarding the conversation around like Web3, NFTs, and et cetera, and how all of these things are being really used and used to benefit a certain group of people and really made to propel a different group of people. And that is done very intentionally. It's a design flaw. It's designed to be that way. But
it gives me anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people prey on that anxiety. But yeah, Ernest, did you want to add something?
I really want to get back to more about solutions to this phenomenon, if possible. Kristina is talking about bringing more human elements, empathy, human interaction into this world of robotics. And Christian is actually invading these sources like TikTok and bringing positive, possibly revolutionary ideas to a popular culture, and it may hit them. So I'm just thinking that with the world where it is today, with over 80 million people homeless, stateless, because of weather conditions, droughts, hurricanes, earthquakes, and wars and terrorism, you got a whole instability around the world. And we look at ourselves as African Americans, but there's a narrowness in that, because I learned from meeting people in Honduras and Canada and in Cuba that are Black, they're African Americans too. So we need to find a way to broaden our horizon and to get people engaged in even invading these sources that are popular to the masses, and bringing the positive content, or bringing some more flexibility or avenues alternative to this stoic avatar type beings that's transmitting education. And also even with robotics, they're making robotics developing neurological apparatus within them for emotion, for being able to read people non-verbally and things like that. So it's scary to me, you know, and but I don't want to panic. Just settle down and figure out how we can deal with this bewildering situation in the way we deal with government and the way we deal with arts. Arts is a transformational experience. Music, dance, theater, all of those, poetry, literature can be transformed. We've been able to influence that largely. I love the James Baldwins, Malcolm X, all these folks, Toni Morrison and all. And then we have the government, where we have pioneers that are not just Black and proud, but Black and progressive, you know, and moving forward.
Ooh, I like that.
And not settling for crumbs for the masses, but figuring out a way we can make some real systematic changes that enhance the overall life and quality of life. Even though 70 million people voted for Trump, there's still some ways we can go and do it, become more of a progressive country that's not fit into that status quo system we have of a Democratic versus Republican. Where are we in those equations? One is using us and one is ignoring. And so what can we do in those kind of vacuums too? So I just want us to, let's stay connected. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's find ways we can better network, how we can learn from each other, how we can support one another, and not just on this Zoom platform, but some kind of daily way or regular way we can kind of, I guess, organic growing together kind of thing. So that's my hope. So.
Thank you so much, Ernest. You really ended us on such a profound note. I can't thank everyone enough for being here tonight, especially a special thank you to the four of you. I feel really privileged to have been able to spend this time with you. And I know everyone at Bluebonnet feels the same way. So with that being said, if you're interested in Bluebonnet or what we're doing, feel free to check out our website. We have all the details. Our fellowship cohort for March starts up soon, so feel free to apply. Encourage other people to apply as well. And Kristina has put down in the chat ways you can stay connected with Ruby, Ernest, Kristina, and Christian. Be sure to follow them on all their social media and everything of the sort.
And tithe to Ruby's campaign.
Yes, absolutely. We're wishing Ruby lots of luck with her race. But yeah, thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This was amazing. Thank you all. Great to meet you all.
Yes, likewise. Y'all stay safe.
Yes.
Thank you.